You're listening to TFM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
Hey everyone, I'm Rod Roddenberry, and you're listening to Trek FM.
Are you taking all these books? I thought I'd take some light reading. Guess I got bored.
Hello and welcome to TFM's local books and comic show. I am just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and so excited to have with me in the news this week is the one and only Bruce Gibson.
And here I am, the one and only, to talk about many things.
No, just one thing.
Three
tonight,
things.
Bruce. Just one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
One thing tonight.
Well, I mean, I guess it's 3 in 1. So,
Three
the
in
Trinity?
one. Yes.
Not that Trinity. No, we're not going to go into that deep. But before we dive into the news tonight, just a reminder, you can find us wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for checking out Literary Treks. Of course, you can find us anywhere. And when you do, make sure you're subscribed so you get the show as soon as it drops. If you're on Apple Podcasts, give us a star-rating review. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's listening. You can find us on Twitter at TrekFM or on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. We got the listeners-only discussion group on Facebook that you can join called the Babel Conference and enjoy talking to listeners from all over the world. So we hope you do that. And you can also go to the website at trek.fm/contact, choose a show, choose Larry Treks, and you can send an email to Bruce and I. We'd love to hear from you, and maybe some ideas of books you'd like to have us cover, or especially as we look towards the next year and all that kind of stuff. So really would appreciate that. But Bruce, the big thing in the news, and the only thing we have in the news tonight to really talk about, is the fact that all 3 covers now have been released for the Coda series, which is pretty phenomenal because they really do make that one sheet, which, please, God, please, can they just give us a poster for?
Right. Will they? Probably not, but I hope so. They really should, because this is beautiful. That 3rd cover that has come out features the Defiant on it, which in a lot of ways surprised me because I thought we were either going to see Voyager or the Titan. And I was not expecting the Defiant because in the 2nd cover, we have the space station of Deep Space Nine and we have the Aventine. So why, those are kind of Deep Space Nine connections. So really 2 out of the 3 covers are more DS9 focused. That doesn't mean the books are heavily DS9 focused. They may be, but don't judge a book by its cover.
Well, and that's exactly what we're doing here, Bruce. So we're judging the entire series by its covers. And, I love the way that, the covers, we talked about with Moments Asunder, and then, of course, with Ashes of Tomorrow, and now Oblivion's Gate, how they all connect together, and you kind of see this idea of, like, this timeline and things beginning to kind of, like, come apart. We get the Defiant flying into almost looking like it's becoming a blueprint. It's reverting back to a blueprint status, the shattered glass, like you talked about last time with the idea of the mirror universe popping up and just the way in which the entire Star Trek universe as we know it through the lit verse all coming apart. And, it's sad, but it's also just such a great piece of art. And, I gotta say, a few years back when they did Seekers, I actually got one of the posters from that. I can't remember. I don't remember which one of the authors sent it to me, but they had some copies that they had at a convention, and they had some extras. And I'm like, are you sure we don't just have copies of this as a poster that we want to give out? Because this is just, seriously, this is a beautiful piece of art that I would absolutely love to see, and I would put on my wall. because, it is a part of Star Trek that for me has meant so much, and now it's coming to an end. And I think they did a great job of selling it. And like you, I was surprised to see Defiant on there and not Titan. And I wonder why that is, especially since I feel like almost Titan would have felt like a good ship to have there because Titan was specifically created in the Litverse.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point, because this really ties up the Titan line of novels. We're probably not going to get Titan novels anymore, but the Defiant will live on in future Deep Space Nine novels. So yeah, you would kind of expect to see the Titan, and especially since we've been seeing the Titan in Lower Decks recently. So people are more and more familiar with the look of the Titan ship. So it is surprising that it's not there. Now I'm even more disappointed that's not there. I'm glad the Defiant's there.
Do you think they did that because of Lower Decks and they didn't want people to get confused? Did they think we're that dumb?
No. I would just say that a Titan cover probably sells better. I'm sorry, a Defiant cover sells better than a Titan cover. That's probably it. Because if you look at book 1, it's the Enterprise E. Book 2, people are familiar with Deep Space Nine, but it's not the original space station, but you can probably tell that it's probably DS9. And then the third one's Defiant. These are more familiar ships and stations than the Titan is.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And so all in all, I think we would say that these covers get the stamp of approval.
3 of them. Yes.
All 3. Great stuff. I'm really excited. I can't wait to read this series. As sad as it is, I also think it's going to be great. 3 authors that I definitely trust, so I can't wait to get there. And Bruce, I'm really excited because this week we have an interview with John Jackson Miller about his new book, Rogue Elements, that I'm going to dive into. So, I hate to say see you later, but we'll see you later.
Okay, bye.
Well, so excited as always to have back another author here on Literary Treks, and this week we've got the great John Jackson Miller back to talk about his Picard novel, Rogue Elements, which, John, I see you've got the art hanging right up behind you there in your office.
I do. I do placards for these things that I can take to conventions, and this one just has been in Raleigh, North Carolina. It has been in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. It has been in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and it has been in Kansas City on consecutive Saturdays here in July and August. So it's seen some travel, and it keeps hopping back up on the wall. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's sort of like a I don't know. It's sort of like a merchant freighter. It keeps going to new places and then coming back.
It's like your own La Sienna.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's great. That's great. Well, obviously, one of the things that I was really interested with this book is the fact that you got a chance to, write about Rios, kind of fill us in on his backstory. So a lot going on there. And in many ways, this book, you even mentioned it in, I think, the afterword, where you're kind of talking about some of the inspiration there. You wanted this book to feel very different. And so I would love to kind of hear you just talk a little bit about, as you were getting into this, first, what made you decide, hey, I want to do Rios? And 2, what was the inspiration here for where you end up, just going with the story?
I keep thinking, when I finish a book, I keep thinking, well, that's it, I'm done. It's because there's so much effort that goes into them, and I'm not really, I don't, I'm in a position, fortunately, where I don't chase assignments. Usually, almost everything is something where I get approached, and so it's never really a case where I have a burning desire to write about this character or that character, and I need to immediately go start pitching it. But what happened is, I got done with the Die Standing novel, which is the Emperor Georgiou book. And it was, that book we were getting ready to publish just as the pandemic hit, and just as everything began to unravel in the world, and when that novel actually came out, it wasn't with anything like the big impact that I was hoping it was going to have, just in terms of me being able to physically go to places and
right.
Sell it, or even in many cases, people being able to go into the stores and buy it. Although the book did well, it's a different commercial environment that's out there in. And so that was already kind of the picture when we get to the summer of 2020. But already before then, I have seen Picard, and the thing that I immediately liked the most was Rios and La Serena and the holographic characters, and you get a certain amount of screen time for these things, but probably he and the ship and the holograms maybe get like an hour 20 over the course of all the episodes of the series. So you're left with quite a lot of blanks that you could fill in, quite a lot of canvas that you can work with, and of course we do find out his story, but there's just a lot that's there, and so not that there aren't directions to go with the other characters, but if you've read some of my other work, including Knights of the Old Republic, and then another book I did, the only book in my own universe, which is called Overdraft, which is about a merchant, space merchant, space trader. That's an area that I really enjoy writing about. And with Star Trek, unless you're writing about the guy selling tribbles, Jones, whatever his name is, in the Trouble with Tribbles, there's not a lot of trader characters that you get.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, but Picard gives you this interesting situation, which is we have large swaths of the galaxy now where there is no Federation protection. There is no there probably was never a situation where it was a post scarcity society, if you want to call it that, in a lot of these places. That requires a stable government like the Federation, a benevolent government like the Federation, and an unlimited energy source to be able to do that, and then the technology, and then the will. But we already had gotten in Picard, and then also in Una's book, Last Best Hope, we kind of got the predicate for everything basically. On that Romulan Star Empire part of the big map, and I'm gesturing to the big map because I have both of the posters from the stellar cartography thing on my wall. Yeah, and I pay attention to them constantly. It's actually never out of my view when I'm writing, because I'm always thinking about, this is a whole region where this prevails, and here it's lawlessness and want and refugee flight and fear, and all of this is going on. So it's an area where the dynamics are going to be completely different. And so to go back to the beginning, when I was approached about doing a Picard novel, I said preemptively, I'll write Rios, and I really am only interested in writing Rios. And Margaret Clark said, "You're in luck." That is exactly what we were going to ask you to do. And then when I spoke with Kirsten Beyer, one of the co-creators of the series, it was brought up by me that I really wanted to write a book that, even though it was going to be, set in this area that was going to be tumultuous, I said I wanted this book to be fun. I wanted it to be the summer read. I mean, I wanted it to be, an adventure that would sprawl, that would go a lot of places, that would be an Odyssey, and the previous two novels. I mean, Enterprise War was a military science fiction novel, rigidly timed because I had to, lay it up against season 1 of Discovery. And, there were some things that I just had to get in at certain spots, like everything to do with the Red Angel.
Right.
And then, of course, likewise with the Georgiou book, Die Standing, there's only so much time that I had to work with. I had destination, starting point and destination were laid out, but also, again, this is a different kind of book. It's a spy novel. It's a very dark novel. And the one thing that Enterprise War and Die Standing had in common, besides the Discovery name, and the fact that Discovery does not appear in the book, the one thing that they had in common was that the body count was huge. Those were very, very deadly books for a lot of the participants. But I wanted to do a book, as I said, where almost nobody dies, and that's kind of where Picard went, and the Rogue Elements went. Some things that I decided early to determine some decisions later on, and I always knew that it would be a thing where readers would not figure out what the book was about till probably about 40% of the way in. I have no patience for impatient readers, but we sort of let things develop.
Right.
And we realize as we go on these travels, as we go on this Odyssey, that Rios has been in the middle of this adventure all along, and he just doesn't know it yet.
Right.
And that's not an easy thing to actually get down on the page in a plot. I hate the plotting stage, but that was the feeling that I wanted the book to have.
Mm. Yeah, and I think when you said that, it really made sense to me, because one of the things that I really liked about the book, and I think it's because you're writing about Rios as a character who is kind of directionless and listless because of what's happened in his life, and therefore the beginning of the book reflects that feeling, and you don't really feel like there is a purpose to a lot of what's happening, and like you said, about 40% of the book, and then everything starts to kind of play in, but that's also when the character himself begins to move, to make a shift. And so I think you really nailed that, and that feeling of like fun and frivolity that Star Trek can give us, while at the same time giving us depth, was perfect as well. Because in all honesty, I don't need more like ponderous tomes about how awful the world is, and how awful everything is. Like, the fact that this didn't have that is, I think, one of the reasons I responded myself to it. And so, I think you nailed exactly what you're going for.
Federation lovers are not going to have a lot to like here, but because that's what we were presented with. That's the template that we've been given to work with in this part of the timeline. But, one of the things that we got a couple of very large non-governmental organizations that we create that are in this book, the Silvus Project and the Interspecies Medical Exchange. There are still people doing good things. And, not everybody's motives are necessarily, completely pure. But you have, I think what is by the end, a happy ending for every single player. And I don't want to get too far into spoilers until whatever part of the broadcast we get to the spoilers. But even our villain, gets a resolution. that I think is if you liked that character when he was on screen, you like where he's parked. You like where he winds up.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I guess probably a good idea. Talked kind of broadly about everything. We'll go ahead and let people know spoilers here. We're going to dive deep now into the book, and obviously one of the things that this book has is, and I love that you did this because it's my favorite Star Trek TOS episode, which is a piece of the action. So bringing in the Iotians here and kind of, I mean, obviously updating them to the point where they live in now the Picard universe, where they are at this point in the timeline, what their society is like. I would love to hear about what it was like to try and make that work, because it's not an easy thing to make work, this planet where everybody acts like a mobster, and they know they're not alone anymore. So,
well, it's one of those things where while others had toyed with the Iotians before, a character here or there in the other fiction, nobody had ever really done a lot with them. And also the comics, nobody had really done a lot with them. And it was never a really deep dive into what would the cultural ramifications of this society be. What about them? This is not the stereotypical cargo cult kind of a thing. It is something else in that this species and must have been in some way predisposed to respond to this particular stimuli. A stimuli that in this episode, the other cool thing for me was a piece of the action was literally aired the day I was born. And
nice.
Awesome. I don't mean on my birthday. I mean, I was probably 3 hours old, and it's on NBC. So Fizbin and I, same day. But anyway, so that's just a fun thing. But no, I tried to think about it and say, well, what would have made them like this? And what would it be in that book that would have made them see it as a better life? One of the things is simply that, what's a hallmark of the 1920s? It is the period in American history where crime goes from being diffuse and decentralized to organized and hierarchical. In Chicago, that's what the book is describing. I mean, that's obviously in a prohibition era Chicago in the Chicago book. And then I get further into another notion, which is one of the real people that I quote in the book right at the very beginning is Lucky Luciano. And in preparing for this book, I read a book about two books. It's one book, but it's a book within a book about Luciano, and it's just horrifying. The lives that the people in his organization led, and that particularly the women that surrounded that lifestyle. Between just all of the ways they had to victimize people, including members of their own regime, it was just this is not something people should be cosplaying necessarily,
right?
But the fact is, because of the Untouchables, another Desilu show, which is of course why they had that episode anyway, because they had all the the props left over, and of course our love affair culturally with that with organized crime, be it from the Godfather movies or on up to Goodfellas. Things still things will, as time goes on, our movies get more realistic, things get seamier, but at the same time, it still is glorified in some way, shape, or form, and so I had Spock actually is in this book in a quote where he said that this book glorified as it codified. The book that they got, it both gave them a Magna Carta, so to speak, a way of organizing what had previously been a colossal mess of a society, and it also gave them a uniform and marching orders and ranks. And if we can accept that other civilizations, or rather other species, can quickly adopt and be integrated into Starfleet, for example, the Federation and Starfleet, then we have to accept that, if you've got the right kind of book, and we never really see what's in the book. We see like a page or two. But if you got the right kind of book, you've got something you could possibly build a society around. But I mean, that's the deep thought part of it. Obviously, the fun part of it was it gave me the road to creating the character Ledger, who is probably, right up in the top 3 or 4 of my favorite original characters that I've created, because I write a good capitalist in terms of Griff in Knights of the Old Republic, or Jamie Sturm in Overdraft, or her here, and I just really wanted to have somebody who, just by definition, would get under Rios' skin, while at the same time not giving much of a darn what happens to him, because she is as we have, as we see here, she's exiled.
Yeah, I really, her as a character was so fascinating, and part of that was because she's very similar to some other characters that we know. Obviously, she's kind of similar in some ways, but I think a more friendly version somehow of Vash, which, like, maybe because she's not pretending as much. Like, she doesn't really care about Rios for a lot of the book, and then they start to learn to care about each other, but they don't want each other to know it, So, well,
the Iotians are shown to be very surface. They don't hide their feelings. They are. We see that in the TV episode. They are simple enough, some of them, that they can be tricked by Fizbin, but they are also, quick to every emotion you can imagine. It struck me that, she is herself, constrained by the rules of her chunk of the society, and the expectations of it. And she's already straining against it when the book begins. She's already trying to make her own, little mini empire. It was very interesting following Die Standing with this, because Giorgio comes from a mirror universe where the rewards and the costs and everything, the expectations in the society, you are expected to rise, you are expected to take control. Well, this is the same sort of thing, but the people that they're emulating, at least in what we come to find out is a sanitized version of Chicago mobs, are not cheerless. Right. There are joys in it. One of my disappointments about, I just came from, Planet Comic-Con, Kansas City, and somebody who had to cancel was Paul Sorvino. And of course he's in Goodfellas, and one of the great moments in that movie is all the characters in prison, cooking dinner for each other, and it's clear that this is the social highlight of the cell block and of their lives, and of course, there's a hedonism that's involved in all of this, whether it's listening to Sinatra or going to clubs or the musician that's in The Godfather. There's always it's not they're not just the Sith. They're not just the Terrans who are just all about we're going to crush you. And that's going to be us. That's going to be victory for us. They are trying, in some sense, to live the high life at the same time. And so, when we cross paths again with Ledger and after our initial meeting, she's on her way to a vacation, and it's clear that she's got all the clothes anybody would ever want, and it's clear that she's going to Ryza, and it's clear that she's not a robot in her society, but it's also clear that she is not as ingrained in that society and is not as ruined by it as Boss Arco is,
right?
And Boss Arco, in my mind, Boss Arco is literally the woman that's on that's on Boss Oxmix's desk in the red dress. She says, "I'll never wear the red dress again." And again, she is basically the end result of her society if you've been in it for 100 years and continued to live the mob life, as opposed to we do leave room if you're still back on Iotia, Sigma Iotia 2, we do leave room for the idea that Kirk's vision worked, and that's a more peaceful society. But there had to be emigres, there had to be people struck out on their own, and as soon as they had the ability to, and that's what she's part of.
Well, and I think one of the things that really makes that work is that we have an idea that still exists in the Star Trek world because of the Ferengi, right? Because they're very much a part of that type of system. And so it was interesting to have that juxtaposition of, especially with Ledger, who is trying to kind of break out of the mold a little bit and yet still follow some of the same rules, but do it her way. And that reminded me very much of what we see with the female Ferengi who are trying to earn profit and break out. They want to follow the Ferengi mold, but they also want to break it at the same time and kind of make a new mold. And so I think that's one of the things that really made that work, because it mirrors that in a different part of the universe with different characters. And of course, the Ferengi were always a good ability for us to be able to kind of see ourselves in it much more easily. And so it allows that to happen. And that's, great Star Trek writing, because it's always been about trying to help us see ourselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so, Ledger was such a fantastic character. And in the end, I mean, I think with playing with the Iotians, being where you were in the book, I really love this idea that we're on the final frontier, where the Federation doesn't exist. And, we're basically kind of in that intersection, like where Deep Space Nine was back in the day, where things aren't all hunky-dory, there's very little law and order. People are making up. This is like the Wild West again. And I think that really, really made this so much fun, because you don't have that ever presence of Starfleet and all that stuff to kind of get in the way of, quote unquote, the fun stuff happening.
That's true. I mean, I do try to say, there is the bad stuff. I mean, as we're experiencing now. Eventually the Army leaves. Eventually there is a power vacuum, whenever there's a shift in power. And so, unless you have a situation where there's a Marshall Plan for this part of the galaxy that's going to rebuild everything. Well, the point of Last Best Hope, the point of Picard is there isn't. The Federation has failed in its mission, and I think Una does a good job of laying out a lot of the reasons why this went the way it did. And so again, it just was a matter for me of looking at the map, and anybody who wants to follow along this book on the map can sit there and say, okay, these are places that were just behind the neutral zone on our side, where they're not Federation planets, but they've benefited from us being around. They've benefited from frequent Starfleet visits, and then there are places that didn't, like the planet that it starts on, and the references that it probably hasn't seen a visit from Starfleet since Jonathan Archer was there. And of course, that's where we saw the planet to begin with. There are so many callbacks in this book, and I guess we're going to get way into spoilers at that point. But there are so many callbacks in this.
Yeah, no, there totally are, and that's, so I definitely want to get there, but the thing about this book that I was really struck by, John, was your writing, Rios, and this man who is shattered, who is broken, who has, because, and in many ways, this theme plays out on a bunch of different layers throughout the book, and you keep doing it, and it works perfectly because he's a man who has had his foundation pulled out from under him, and in that, tragedy is about his atonement. It's about his finding a way forward. Like, how do you rebuild when everything you had built your life on, you feel like has turned out to be a lie? And we see that with Rios. We see that obviously in Picard with what happened with the Federation itself, kind of doing that. We see that with the way in which the major mystery that ends up in the end of the book, like all of these different characters are dealing with a foundation having crumbled, and then what do we put our faith in, and which is where you came in with, and I loved using the idea of the Abraham story of, is the sacrifice worth it? Like, and what am I put? So all of that really, really works.
Well, it's great when a plan comes together, like Hannibal Smith says. Again, a lot of this stuff is just found. You realize, oh, that rhymes. This thing that he's going through feels like this other thing that somebody else is going through, or this other thing in a story. Because we're having to establish that he, was not originally a reader of philosophy, but he learns to as this book goes on, and we come up with a mechanism for exposing him to it and a reason for going into it. And we even make Jean-Luc Picard's book the very first book he reads, and we also make sure he hates it. And of course, that's a book and we knew he had the book because he mentions it in the TV show. But again, as far as him, on his path, one of the challenges I had was that, he can't resolve it in this book. He doesn't get closure until the TV show. He just has to get to a point where he doesn't hate himself every second. And, we don't necessarily get the idea that, where he's landed here at the end is necessarily going to stick. Because, once life gets in the way again, and there are 5, 6, 7 more years, or 7 more years between the end of 6 more years between the end of my book and the show. That's a lot of time for things to go wrong again. But no, the idea was Well, one of the interesting things is this is the first novel-length book that I have done where, with the exception of the prologues and the excerpts, the excerpts that I did, one for each section of the books, which is a device I can talk about later. Rios is the only point of view character. And that I almost never, ever do. In fact, I have never done it for a book this long. As I say, it's all Rios until the end where, we have a couple of epilogues that I wanted to do where it really just could not be in his mind. But yeah, I mean, this makes this much more of a personal journey, and it keeps us in his head the entire time.
Well, and I really love that because, like you said too, for so much of the, like, a good, 40% of the book, we are kind of ambling, it feels like, and part of that really has to do with where Rios is, and it's not. There's a couple things that really stuck with me, and they kind of happen a little bit more towards the end of the book, where the Klingons in Sto-vo-kor, the holographic program, tell him to do a great deed. And the moment where Rios starts to get himself busy, where he starts, he stops wallowing and starts focusing on something else, is when his life begins to get better. And I love when he tells Rafi, that he's just been too busy, to basically wallow. And you can see the I love how you kind of point out exactly what's wrong with Rafi and what is helping Rios to maybe find a path that could get him towards being in a better place one day, which, the show will then help us see him kind of really take that step finally. But, it also reminded me, we can't recover from massive disasters in our lives on our own. We need help. Yeah. And whether that's individuals or nation states, and again, that's where that theme plays out. Like, Rios finds this help by getting himself thrown into this adventure that he had no plans for. And the same way that the Romulans, they couldn't do it all on their own. Yeah. And then the Federation leaves them and it turns into a disaster. So it's like there is this really nice illusion throughout all of these different thematic elements coming together. And I thought it was really beautiful because so many of us, I think, you mentioned, writing this book and thinking about COVID and everything, and so many of our lives have kind of like felt like they've fallen apart. How do we put them all back together? And watching a character do that in a way that, again, was not ponderous, but was fun, but still made us think, I think is exactly the type of book we needed. Well,
the one of the things about the Picard show is the big three characters in it. To my mind, you get, well, actually four if you count if you count Soji. Everybody's life is already ruined by the time the show starts. Picard's life is already ruined. Although it's really lovely where he lives, he's already lost most of what he loves. Rios, Rafi, in both cases, their lives have gone to a new chapter that is not what they want. And so, I wanted to be careful with Rafi in particular, that she was not, always, sort of, mother confessor, wise sage all the time. She had to be a mess too. They had to be, they had to show why they connected, which is to a degree, they're, helping each other just survive. And then I had to come up with a way to get Picard in, because I was not going to let this book, perhaps the silliest comment that I keep getting is, that doesn't look like Jean-Luc Picard. When people see the book on the stand, and I'm like, you just haven't seen the show. But Picard's in the book. I needed Picard to be in the book, and I needed him to be in the book a lot of places. He's a lot of places in the book, where he has an impact on things because of things he did in the past, people whose lives he touched in the past. And then finally he does give us, he gives us the clue that helps to unwrap the mystery without knowing it.
No, man. So before we leave Rios, we have to talk about you kind of creating how he creates the holographic doppelgangers for himself, which I love that it's completely a drunken mistake. Like nothing worse than waking up to the worst one-night stand decision you've ever made.
Well, the question I had in the beginning is what kind of starship has all this stuff on it? What kind of starship has a holodeck? Well, I decided to make one reason for that. What kind of starship has the ability to make these other crew members? And I came up with a rationale for that, which is it's basically it's not easy to find good help, and
it's true.
And so what would you do if you had the ability to holographically project characters that could carry things and interact with their environment? And then what would their relationships with one another be? Because I did create the notion that there's this distinction between how holodeck characters interact with each other on the holodeck. They're not Moriartys. They're all sort of within the program. And then how these EMH, et cetera, would interact in these other places, because they're going to act more like the Doctor in Voyager.
Yes.
Where they have a bit more of an inner life. But then I needed to get into, would they talk to one another? Would they share information, or would the information be siloed? And I decided, let's do something where we silo the information to a degree, because we see that as the case in Picard, where they're all together in that intervention scene, trying to piece together bits of Rios's past. It's just not necessary for them to talk to one another. And then it was a matter of, can I actually figure out ways to make this come alive elsewhere in the plot, and under the heading of found rhymes or found parallels. This feeling that he's got while he's putting back together the Tucker, the car, which is already for those people. And again, this is one of those things that I touch on, but if you've watched Tucker, A Man in His Dream, you know that the Tucker was a stillborn thing. You know that the car was crushed by the powers that be, and that that the creator was run out of the business. But one of the things that comes up as he's putting it together is he's realizing, back then no two systems on this car really talk to one another. This is before fuel computers. This is before anything that we're starting to get with cars that are getting smarter now, that are able to say, hey, slow down. Here's the environment. Here's what our tires are telling us. Here's what this is telling us. I wanted that kind of dynamic going on with the EMHs or the EHs, the holograms, and then as far as the device for making them all the way they were, we do kind of hear him riffing in some other fake accent voices just on his own when he's alone, and so it's not a big leap to think that he would on a drunken bender go whole hog on this.
That was great. I mean, it was such a fantastic idea because it's not on purpose, like you said, it is a drunken mistake that he makes. And then he's just like, it's too much trouble to undo.
Yeah. I should say it was Kirsten's idea that I not bring them all on, and this is very, very early. She said, let's not bring them all on at once. Let's bring them on kind of in the order that we see them in the show, but let's really drag it out. Where it's almost one for section in the book. But the idea I realized was, once he realizes they're there, he's going to do everything in his power not to activate them.
Which I love too.
Yeah.
Which in some ways kind of plays with that like stereotype of a guy just not wanting to ask for directions or ask for help. And that's kind of where Rios is in his life anyway. He doesn't want to ask for help from anyone. And so just to make it that funny thing of that, one, there are these doppelgangers for him now, so it's even more annoying. And two, he's not in a place where he's looking to ask for help from anyone. It worked out so perfectly. Now, you've done a lot of work with Klingons over the years. Obviously, you had the Prey trilogy.
Yeah.
And I was not expecting you to tie into my favorite Star Trek film. And you had all of these undiscovered connections with Star Trek 6.
No pun intended.
Exactly.
No pun intended.
And
I guess we're in the spoilers part of this.
Absolutely spoiler here, but I wanted you to talk about where you got that idea and weaving that all together, because it turned out to be, I got to say, it was brilliant, man. It was brilliant.
Well, I mean, we were able to actually give a dead character closure when we've never met him. This ship is the manifestation of Varangan's life, and that's the way I pronounce it, even though in the audiobook, which is wonderful, by the way, Robert Petkoff gets the actual real Klingon pronunciation of that word correct, Varangan or something like that. But the idea was that this guy, right in his name, is he's a schmuck. I mean, he's somebody that was cast out. He's just been living on the edge of everything. And I did not want, because I had done Prey, I did not want to get heavy into discommendation, because that was a big theme of that trilogy. And so that's just kind of assumed. You assume that he's a non-entity. And as he gets into, as Rios discovers the bar, the tavern, and realizes that these are the only friends that this man had, besides in real life, these two Ferengi, who are also kind of against type, because we realize by the time it's over that even though one of them is from the Captain's Holiday episode, yes. Even though one of them is from that, we realize that they're not necessarily the bad guys here, and they just were asking. Or they were putting Varangan into a position where he was going to have to make money on something shameful, something he inherited from his father, something that he didn't realize exactly. I presume that he didn't know what was inside the thing until the two Ferengi cracked it open, and he realized, oh, this is an artifact of his father's general of Chang, and that was something where I wanted him to sort of create this world around him of sort of this Potemkin village of Klingons, where nobody's real, and everybody is basically they're based on what the computer knows about Gorkon and Kalis and all these characters, but also since he's been interacting with it, they've developed as holographic characters develop. They have their own opinions of him by now. They have their own notions of him by now, and so we get in Kalis in particular, who we understand he shared the most with. Kalis understands. This is I know I'm a holographic character. I know he has created me to be his confessor, basically. I know he has created this place to pretend that he is somebody. And you know what? That's okay. He even tells Rios that. He says, I see that we have this is someone who never did anyone ill. This is somebody who never hurt anybody. And if this is what he needed us for, even though we're programmed to think as Klingons, we're okay with that. I wonder if you caught the Prey reference.
I feel like,
yeah, there is one. There's a big one. There
were so many connections that you're talking about in the book.
Oh yeah. Well, cover your ears, folks, if you want to try to find out what it is, or skip 2 minutes if you want to find it on your own. But one of the Klingons that Gorkon introduces to Rios is a very young Klingon who, at the age of 20, leapt in front of a disruptor beam to save his commanding officer.
Yes.
And so he is the example of a Klingon who never found any fame like the others did, but was famous, or was his life was considered valuable enough that Varangian would know to program him later on because of what he did. And that is a guy named Torav. Torav has a son who never amounted to anything, or actually who came to a bad end, rather, Gorkon tells us. And of course, that son is Korg.
Yes. Yeah.
You're
right.
And that is the main character from Prey. And, I don't care what happens in Coda. It's there.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's fantastic. So
it made sense to be there because, again, it wasn't just a callback kind of thing. It was, again, this is a discommendation, and fathers and sons are all through this. And the only thing that I wish I could have done is, we don't know anything about Rios's father, and so there was nothing to do there.
Yeah, I mean, the connection there I thought was really interesting. Like, you talked about this idea of them kind of being confessors, and obviously Rios spends so much time in the book reading philosophy and, kind of gets into the metaphysical and everything of trying to find that. And I loved how you, in many ways, kind of mirror Parch with Rios, in the sense that they thought that they were doing something good. They thought they were a part of something good, and it turns completely against them and shatters their world. And I loved you kind of bringing her in because, one, phenomenally just well-rounded character in that sense of creating this mystery we're after, but two, her creations, the actualities are amazing as well.
Yeah.
And so talk a little bit of kind of like bringing her into the story and the way that she connects then with the behind the scenes of, Star Trek VI.
There's always the MacGuffin, and I wanted a MacGuffin, the thing that everybody was after, that, I didn't want something that was named in the beginning that everybody was going to be chasing and whatever. And I didn't want to oversell it in the beginning. I wanted to undersell it in the beginning, where you thought it was nothing all along. And suddenly you see Chang and you drop the book. Is kind of how I wanted people to feel about it. And I wanted to craft around, because I started with that moment. And then I worked in either direction and said, okay, what must an artist who crafted something like this have gone through in her life that she would not see in him a villain, that she would not see in him an operator. I mean, she might see in him a villain, but she doesn't see the immorality in brokering anything for him. She actually thinks she's doing the right thing because, again, she's sort of in this very rarefied air of artistic society. It's very clear she's got enormous sums of money, resources, and her brother as well. And this tied in with what I wanted from the Marchesa and the Duke, which is, I knew that was going to be her family. I knew that I wanted to have sort of this triad of that's maybe not the right word, this trio of female characters that Rios is bouncing between, and almost literally so conversationally when I put them all at the same table together, in the professor and the princess, the Marchesa, and the gangster in Ledger. I wanted this character to come to life through the legend that we built up over the book, and probably we're still not sure by the time we get there why I've been talking about Parch so much, why we've been making such a big deal about the actualities, but we at least by now have seen why people care about the actualities, because we've seen T'Pau. And that is another case where that should be a moment where even if you think that things have been developing slowly, you've got to go, oh, wait, this book might actually be about a lot bigger events than what's here. And so, I mean, you've got huge things going on in the middle of what I think a lot of people, and I think one review even, I don't read reviews generally, but my wife will tell me about them. One describes it as, this is kind of a fun, one of the comedic episodes, like a piece of the action. There's heavier stuff in here, and she is part of that through line. She was necessary to make, this one relationship. I wanted Rios to have this one relationship where, it would be typical, I think, of a lot of relationships. We sort of understand about Rios that if he doesn't have a girl in every port, he has a wide variety of lives that he has touched for a night or longer, and I wanted to give her something there, and then of course it all wraps into our villain from the book, and I have been so careful not to reveal his presence. I discussed it with everybody involved in the book, and everyone said, once again, do not tell anyone that spoiler city again, that Kivas Fajo is in the book, because he's not been used. And I'm an obsessive collector of things. Picard describes obsessions in his book that he does. I wanted to really seriously dive into what would make him work in this society as a free person, as somebody who's on the loose again, and respectable. And one thing that we know was going on in the world during the pandemic is people were selling everything that wasn't nailed down. I've got comic books that I literally, signed at my last event in Virginia, in Richmond, on March 1st, 2020, that were encased in plastic and sold for thousands of dollars before the end of the year. those comics, are in my own collection of books that I was taking places myself. $3, $4, $5. I was asking for these things. This weekend at Kansas City, various issues of my comics, going for $40, $50, $60, $70 in ungraded condition. And again, just random issues of the books. And it was because the economy of the pandemic made physical things worth more, and gave people a lot of time also to buy, sell, and trade things. And so I worked for the world's largest collectibles publisher, hobby collectible publisher in the country in the world, actually, for 13 years. That was Krause Publications. We did Comics Buyer's Guide, which I worked on, Comics Retailer, which I edited, Scry, the card game magazine, which I edited. But we also had a toy magazine, an old car magazine, an antique magazine, even a military vehicle magazine, everything you could imagine to collect. We had Antiques Roadshow, the idea of those things, the idea of, you can find in your attic something, a fortune that might be hiding there. And then another thing that we saw constantly in that life is that people would bring to our own antique days, which we would call What's It Days. They would bring Batman #2, and we would tell them and identify them and give them everything they needed to connect that valuable thing with somebody who could take care of it and value it and protect it. And all the time we would see these things go back into people's treasure troves, or not the treasure troves, but rather their attics or their closets, only to go in estate sales for pennies on the dollar, or to just be dumped when people needed something. And it was something that I mean, this is a whole weird, subplot that's in here, but I kind of wanted to talk a bit about, this fetishization of items that we have anyway. And of course, books are a big, big part of it. Books as collectibles, books as keepsakes, books as things touching people's lives. And that's why I had this device in the book where I just let the book speak. In the case of the treatise about the Iotians, which is, by the way, by the guy that got shot in the original holodeck mobster episode by Wayland. He wrote that book, but also, it allows me to get some exposition into some places that, also sort of, gives you, this feeling that this is kind of a book about books. And by the time we hit Dixon Hill, I hope people have understood what I'm trying to do.
I'm really glad that you brought us there, because I loved you talking about physical media and its importance. And, I loved, how the talk about, you got electronic media is fine, but what happens when you got to find a new reader to figure out how, to look at it? Whereas a book you can pick up and read anytime. And it's something that, myself, even just when it comes to physical media, for media, like DVDs or what kind of thing, I'm more into collecting those, because you always have them. You can't be taken away from a streaming place and all that kind of stuff. But the beauty of this to me was just the importance of not throwing away thinkers and writers and poets of the past, that these people can still speak into our lives, and that so much can be learned from books and from stories of the past. And just because it's old doesn't mean that it doesn't matter or have something to say to our lives today. And to me, I was really appreciative that you went there in this book.
Well, I mean, as to the physical media part of that, I told you I worked for that collectible publisher I've been running for, I guess now 14 years, so longer than I was at the company. I run a website called Comicron, which is all the sales figures for the comics industry, and going back way back. And one of the things that I said, people are always talking about, the third disruption of the industry or the fourth disruption or whatever that's going on in comics. And I say nonsense always, because the comic books are still there no matter whatever happens. If comic books stop being published tomorrow, there are over 10 billion of them in circulation, and you use the same technology to read them now as you did in 1935 when they first appeared. There is no format drift with comic books. There is no format drift with physical books. As long as they exist, and as long as nothing comes along to eat all the paper or make all the ink fade, they're going to be there, and they offer something beyond just the content, because there's something tactile there. There's something you can smell in the case of some books, and these things trigger memories in many cases. In a sense, it's a memory aid. I mean, I can pick up a comic book, look at the cover, and I can tell you usually where I bought it and what I was doing and what I had for dinner that night. Now that's obsessive compulsive, but I mean that is there. But yeah, I mean in terms of that this is something that survives. I wanted to show that there would be something that would survive the Romulan supernova. There would be something that would survive these other people's lives, and in the case of the Shakespeare Folio, which is I actually looked up the real book to find out what page numbers the Burnham would be on, that one copy of this thing would survive to unlock the door to everything else that was in the story. I'm amazed that I was able to land this thing in a place that I liked. I will say though also there is a reason that this is the longest book I've ever written. I went probably 30,000 words more than I had intended to, because I knew by then I needed to do it, and I knew there were moments that I needed to have, and some things I only realized very, very late in the game. The last conversation that Rios has with the Marquesa is the last thing I wrote in the book, because I realized, oh, wait, I just realized what she did. I just realized, I just realized what she was afraid of. What was the thing that terrified her? And that did not come about until I got to the end and I realized, oh yeah, she would be very, very concerned that Praxis was caused. And and she would be very concerned. So this wasn't just about a small embarrassment. This was going to be about a big embarrassment. And that resolved everything else. And I enjoyed having some characters not totally, the Claggett character who is her enforcer. Rios is able to realize even at the end that that guy is a jerk, but he still was Starfleet, and he will still respond in certain ways to being asked certain things. Even if he's being told to do a bad thing, he will do the bad thing in a Starfleet way. And so that is it. I just enjoyed the heck out of, bringing all these pieces back together, which is a weird thing to say in a book about, a logic puzzle. And I was also really delighted that Margaret Clark and Ed Schlesinger and Simon and Schuster were able to make the graphic design of the chapters happen. And I don't know whether it's that way. I don't know whether it's that way in the ebook or not. It's something that's kind of lost in the audiobook because there's just no way to do it. But I spent an inordinate amount of time working out that. I have always, it takes too much time, but I've always tried to have some kind of a word game going or a game going in my section titles. And people will notice if they go back that the section titles all also relate to the elements of the Wuqing, if that's how it's pronounced, in the correct order that Rios has to have it.
One of the things that you did do when it came to like this idea of the media and the past and all those things, and especially with what we were seeing with the Romulans and the destruction of their empire, and like it really brought to the question of like what is it that's important to hold on to from the past, and what should we let go of, and or what should we maybe cover up sometimes? Because sometimes maybe a cover up is actually the best thing to have happen for certain things. And I thought that was a really interesting question because we were dealing with, in a subtle way, what had happened with the Romulan people, and and kind of talking about this and all these things that are showing up and why people are selling them, and how things last that are physical and keep getting bought and sold. That was really fascinating to me.
Well, I wanted to put Rios in the position of kind of what's one more cover up. He's already had to deal with one, and I wanted him to kind of have this position of well maybe this one is for a good reason. And it's not able to get him to any peace whatsoever about the one he was involved with. But he has, I did give him that choice in the book of, he could make it, he could maybe make it all go away. If he's willing to give up Ledger. And I will say my favorite moment of the book is once she's rescued and they have the conversation about why he did it. And she says, well, you did it to save the treasure. And he's like, well, no, don't. Why do you always go there? And she's like, well, if it wasn't to save the treasure and it was to save me, that takes us into territory that you are not ready for, because she's together. He's still a mess. And he's made some growth in this book, but it's not clear it's going to stick. And likewise for the galaxy, and this region that has been wrecked so badly. There are good things happening with the Silvus project and other things. It's just not clear they're going to stick.
Right. Yeah, that was really good. I loved that conversation they had, and it really made me hope that she shows up in the Picard show someday, because I loved their relationship and I'd like to see it continue. One thing we have to talk about, obviously, before I let you go, is there are further connections in this book, in the sense that Vosh is in the book, Kivas is in the book, we got Marta in the book. You have all these other connections here of people that we know and turn out to be really important in the story.
Yeah, and I didn't want them overpowering it. I didn't even know that I would get away with Vosh, but it made so much sense. What do you do after you've been around the world with Q, or been around the universe and the timeline? If she's going to be who she is, she's still going to chase things. But she's going to have to chase things that she deliberately hid from herself. Mm-hmm. She's going to have to chase things that she deliberately did not go find. The holy grails that were almost too important for her to, rip open the package and see, and because she had to leave herself something. And so they are the unopened book on her shelf. And they are what she's still after. And, it incidentally, I made a point that she would not meet Parch, in the book. I had thought about bringing, a gangs all here moment. And I decided, no, I would rather have her be the person behind the scenes who is, there at the end. And of course, Rios doesn't have a single crew person, on his crew that doesn't have some kind of a secret or another that doesn't get him into some kind of trouble. But yeah, I really wanted, her to, I defy anybody to guess that Chang is in this book before that moment.
Yeah.
Although I've kind of led up to prepping you for it with the Klingon stuff. Vash, you can tell she's there because she hides from the Ferengi, who was in her episode of Captain's Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
She whenever he's around, she's like, okay, I'm out.
Well, and I loved, the idea of because we talked about all this idea of collecting and physical media and all these things. And I love that you brought, Kivas into this story because he is the evil version of what collecting can become, that it is so much of an obsession that you're willing to sacrifice people for just things in the end. I thought, he creates the perfect villain in that.
Well, I'll say Phajocon or Phajocon or whatever it is, the Phajofest, but that is the party. That's the set piece that I was building up to and wanted to have, the auction and everything else. I wanted to show these people that are at his level of collecting, and just how bankrupt their lives are. Dithering about, the spelling of something on a sign or whatever. And it's all about one-upsmanship with them. It's all about conversational pieces. It's all about, who has more stuff. And whoever has the most stuff at the end wins. He was a very, very easy character to write because I could see him being both, kind and solicitous when he needed to be, playing the role that he needed to play in order to get all the stuff from everybody evacuating Romulan space. But at the same time, he's looking for specific things, and this particular one is one that he will do anything for. But it's one of those things where I wanted to have, Rios basically be somebody that he was interested only because he was inhabiting the ship that he cared about, and where he thought the item was. And Rios sneaks up on him. And he realizes way too late. He realizes, oh, this guy is formidable. And so anyway, it was one of those books I never really went back to rewrite anything in terms of some of these moments. I did go back and, as I say, tweak the Marquesas scene.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like, this is a book that has a whole lot of characters in it. And I think just about everybody winds up where I wanted to.
Well, and that's one of the things that I like too, is that, we don't get a ton of Starfleet in this book, but you gave us an admiral that we could kind of believe in, because the only admiral we'd really seen in this version of Star Trek was Clancy, and she was terrible. So to have Picard's friend Marta back from the Tapestry as being this admiral that we could kind of like hold on to as like somebody who's actually out there doing good was great.
She's there, and by the way, what's the name of her ship? It's the Galagian, and Galagian is the chief of engineering in Enterprise War.
That's great.
So that's another little minor callback. But yes, I wanted her to have have a role, and we knew that moment was going to be there. I also knew it would be his lowest moment when she talks to him about everything else. You'll notice that in the book, he doesn't actually get into anything that happened. He dances close to what happened a bunch of times, but he doesn't actually land on it until that night with her. I felt we had to go ahead and spoil that part if somebody hasn't seen Picard already, because I kind of felt like the reader was owed it by then. And you could not be in, no level of denial would have allowed you to be in Rios's head for 130,000 words and not get into what happened. Mm-hmm. So I think this makes it a proper prequel. And if that little bit of the show is spoiled, that's okay with me.
Yeah, I think it's definitely needed for the book, and it makes sense. And I think what'll be interesting too is if the show ever expounds on that to kind of give us more detail on it, because I think all of us as fans would kind of love to know what the heck was all of that, and hopefully that's some place that they're going to go. But man, John, I just, like you said, it's been your longest book that you've ever written. It's probably been our longest conversation that we've gotten to have with you, which I think is amazing because it's always so much. And there was just, like you said, you crammed so much into this book with so many connections. So I really appreciate you spending all the time to talk with us today.
Thank you. And, I've got to say, it validates, the time that went in, because it was a good long time. To be able to have people catch some of these things. We don't even get into the La Sirena. I had to put a lot of work into figuring out actually what was where on that ship. And apparently there's a Tumblr where somebody's doing the same thing, mapping the La Sirena. But it's all of these things go into the soup. All these things go into the stew. And, I got to say, at this book, and particularly the Prey trilogy, because it was even longer. You never can tell when you're at the beginning whether it's going to come out right. Whether you're going to hit what you intend to hit. One of the reasons that I don't really do workshops or writing classes or whatever is I don't know that I can explain how to do this. I start with a mess. I start with a mess. I start with index cards on a magnetic whiteboard, and I know I want Vash in here. I know I want Fejo in here. I know I need something for them to chase. I think Chang. Oh yeah, I know I want Chang. Chang suggests the Klingons. All these things get added, and you just never know until you actually get it done. I hate the plotting stage, but I love writing.
It's awesome, man. Well, let everybody know where they can find you so they can keep up with what you've got coming out, and if there's anything that they need to be looking for on the horizon from you as well.
Yeah. I had a lot of stuff come out this year that either was not expecting or is kind of surprising. Picard, of course, is out in hardcover, audiobook, and ebook. Also, still out, and I'm only now getting to do my first signings for Die Standing, which I was fortunate to have win the Scribe last year. But we also have on the Star Wars front, there is coming out in September. All the short stories that we did for Star Wars Insider Magazine have been coming out in 2 volumes so far from Titan. I have a story in both of them, and I have the lead story in the second one. I have the cover of the first one and the lead story of the second one. Those are hardcovers called, I think, Star Wars: The Fiction Collection, Star Wars Insider: The Fiction Collection. And then the big thing that came out just about a month ago is the entire Knights of the Old Republic series I did is out in one mammoth 1,344 page book, which I'm delighted to say is probably about the best format I can imagine for it. I was delighted to learn while I was at Kansas City that it was the best-selling graphic novel in the comics shop market last month. Not just in dollars, which we would expect because it's a hugely expensive book, but units too. And again, that's partially a consequence of the collector mania that's going on that comic book, but also part of it is people want the book. People who have the book 4 or 5 different ways want the book. That means something to me. And, people can get that at their comic shops. They can get that at my convention appearances this summer while we still have them. Same thing for my website, which is farawaypress.com. Twitter, JJM Faraway. Facebook, John Jackson Miller. Instagram, John Jackson Miller. And then over on, my comics sales chart side. That was so weird because I run the sales charts and I'm number one. I tweeted about that. I said, this is embarrassing, but okay, I'll take it. It's never happened like that before. I've had like 100 comics on the chart, never this. Comicron.com. It also has a Facebook page, a Twitter page, and actually a Patreon. Nice. So people can help me buy some of the really old, weird, distributor catalogs and things that I need to fill out what I need to do my tracking.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I'm glad that came out, the Knights of the Republic. I've read that entire series and I loved that series. So I'm gonna have to look into, because I saw that came out and it's great.
It came out, and also the month before it, the Epic Collection for Volume 4 came out for the Old Republic. That's got my Lost Tribe of the Sith comics.
Oh, that's fantastic.
The fifth one, when that comes out, will have all the Knight Errant comics.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so people will have and eventually, probably like 2025, you'll get Volume 2 of the monster book. People will have in this 2,500 or whatever page monstrosity, 2 volumes, almost everything I did for Star Wars in comics.
That's awesome, man. Well, John, with the success of this book, I hope that they'll have you back to write more in the Star Trek universe. This was phenomenal, and hopefully maybe even get to follow it up with some more Rios. But thank you so much for joining us here on Literary Treks.
Definitely, thank you. I appreciate getting to talk about all this.
Well, Bruce, I definitely love the fact that we get to have the authors here on Literary Treks, and the fact that we get to talk about their work with them and hear about the process of writing these books and the stories and the creative process that goes into that, which is just always so much fun. And I love, John. He's been great to the show, good friend of the show, and so always good to have him back on.
Yeah, I'm glad that he came on the show and did the interview because, as he said to me, he wouldn't do the interview if I was going to be on, so that's why I sat out. So I'm glad that no, of course not. No. But no, John's a great guy. He's one of my favorite Star Wars authors. When I heard he was coming over to Star Trek, I was really excited about that, and I have not been disappointed. As a matter of fact, I think, if I'm thinking back now, I think every Star Trek novel he comes out with gets better and better.
I think you're right. No, I absolutely think you're right, because this is definitely one of his best. And I don't normally do this, but, I would say I really loved this book. I think he did a great job. And I think the best part about it was that regardless of how I felt about Picard as a series, this book stood up on its own, and that was the exciting part.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this book, even if no one's seen the Picard series, they could read this book.
Yep.
It's not a requirement to see Picard in order to enjoy this
100%.
book.
And I think that's a hallmark of a good author. So, well, Bruce, if people do want to catch up with you, see what else you've got going on, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Admiral_Rex. That's Admiral with the underline Rex. I'm also on the Positively Trek podcast with Dan Gunther, talking all things about Star Trek. And I'm occasionally on the Star Wars Report, which we're wrapping up sometime probably in May of 22. So that show is ending with its 501st episode.
And you could find me all over the place, MattRushing02. That's my name on social media, so just check me out on the social media platforms there. You can find me here on the network doing the 602 Club, which is our general geek show where we talk about all of the fandoms we love. And of course, not only doing that, but in that same feed, you can find Snyder Cuts, where John Mills and I talked about everything that Zack Snyder's directed. You could find me doing The Orb as well with Christopher Jones. We talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Don't worry, we've got new episodes coming out of that. We've got some special things in the network coming up very soon, so please stay tuned. And you can also find me over on the Nerd Party Network. I do 2 shows over there. One is called Owl Post with Drea Kaufman. We walked through every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, 1 chapter at a time. And then John Mills and I do Aggressive Negotiations as we talk about Star Wars each and every week. But of course, you know what? Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, live long
and read on.
What do you call that, light reading? To each his own, number one.